Can you see me in there okay?
Yes. That's good.
That's a nice little stand right there.
Yeah, it moves around. So. All right, if you would introduce yourself and tell people where we're at, and then I'll kind of talk about what we're going to chat about.
Yeah. So my name is Derek Webb, and I'm a singer and songwriter, and we are sitting somewhere in the deep recesses of Ecclesia Church, where I've been hanging out for the weekend.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today about hip-hop, which is kind of interesting from your perspective. You're a Christian, a folk singer, you're involved with sites like Noise Trade, you've done electronic projects and that sort of thing. So I guess tell me a little bit about your background of how you got involved in listening to hip-hop. Have you always been a fan? Has it been kind of recently that you've been more attracted to it?
Yeah, well, I've always by trade been a folk singer. I'm an acoustic guitar player, and that's, so I've spent the last almost 20 years from my job playing music and mostly on acoustic guitar. So I've have somewhat of a reputation for being kind of an acoustic musician. But in the last few years, I think it was the way I got into hip hop music. I think there was a combination of things. One was that a lot of the acoustic music that I was listening to or that my friends were making, or even that I was making, I mean, for that matter, I'll throw myself right under the bus with everybody else. It seemed that it was, on the whole, a lot of it lacks a certain energy and a certain abandon and a certain, I don't really even know what it is. I think there's a lack of attention being paid to rhythm and to low-end elements and stuff. I mean, in a lot of acoustic music, it's, I guess just from doing it for so long, I got to where I just couldn't take it anymore. Like I could not, and so there was a point at which a few years ago that I found myself just not listening to any acoustic music. I haven't listened to acoustic music in so long, and and when I go out and tour, I play on acoustic guitar because that's kind of my only instrument I can play very well. But over the last few years, as I was getting more and more interested, and I'll explain my journey to hip hop, but as I did get more interested in hip hop and electronic music, and as the tools for making music became more democratized, less expensive, easier to learn, I kind of found my way into programming and just learned to love those sounds and those rhythmic and low-end elements and just all that, like focusing on that first, making sure that when the track comes on, you actually feel something, even without a lyric, without a, that just the sound of it takes you someplace. I think that a lot of acoustic music's kind of lacking that, and so I started to slowly kind of integrate those sounds into the music I was making and toyed around, experimented with electronic music a little bit, and then, have just tried to kind of close the gap between the music that I love and am listening to, because all I listen to now is hip hop. So kind of closing the gap between the music I love and listen to and the music that I'm making. Now, the way I got to hip hop, honestly, was really interesting because I've always been, again, into folk music. And so I started with Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Woody Guthrie, the folk singers of the 50s and the 60s. And the reason I was drawn to them is because folk music, I've never thought of folk music as a style or a genre as much as an ethic. Like it's like a way to approach making music. And folk artists, in my opinion, especially those four I just mentioned in the 50s, 60s, they kind of considered it their job to tell the stories of the people, the unfiltered stories of the people. So this was the internet before the internet. You would hear what was really happening in the country. You would hear what was really happening in the back neighborhoods and places that most people weren't going and couldn't get to, and wouldn't go to. Like the way, and like you were hearing news about the war. The way you were hearing that stuff was by listening to Woody Guthrie and by listening to Joan Baez and Bob Dylan and Pete Seeger and these guys. And so it was this ethic that they came from with the way that they wrote their music. And as I have followed the thread of folk singers and folk music over the years, that spirit kind of left acoustic music at some point in the 70s, 80s, it just kind of left. And where I picked it back up again, where I picked the thread back up was in hip hop. And in my opinion, hip hop music is the folk music of this generation. Like, and not just like not all acoustic music in the 60s was telling the unfiltered stories of the people, but some was, and there was a concentration of it that was. I feel like hip hop today is the genre where you can you get a sense that spirit is residing there now. Now, not all hip hop music does that,
right?
But there's an unusual concentration of it that really does, that tells the unfiltered stories of the people. These are the folk singers. This is how and so that's why. But and the thing about it is that hip hop music becomes kind of complicated to recommend to people who are not familiar with it.
Yeah.
Because along with hearing the unfiltered stories of the people, if it's told well and honestly, it's going to be in the vernacular of the people, right? And so that's usually most people's biggest problem with hip-hop music is the language. But it would just be dishonest if it wasn't in that vernacular, because that is the language of those stories. And if it was not in that language, it wouldn't be honest. And that's the context that you have to take it in. And then you have to just use your discernment beyond that. But so that's why I've been really drawn to it.
Yeah. And in what ways do you think it represents or interacts or shares the story of God in people's lives and that sort of thing?
Well, I don't know that. I guess I would say I find hip hop music, at least the stuff that I love and that I listen to mostly, there is no more expressive art medium to me than, at least musical medium, than hip hop. Because for instance, when I listen to Yassine Bey, or when I listen to Macklemore, or when I listen to Gambino, or when I listen to some of these guys, I feel like I'm getting so much of their personality.
Just the sheer word count too gives you an opportunity.
That's right. And I feel like they go so deep in terms of not only putting a context on cultural ideas, but they're pulling. I mean, it's just an autopsy. I mean, you just feel like you're seeing and getting so much of a sense of who these guys are, really who they are. And I think some of the kind of more cumbersome poetry of pop music sometimes, it's too easy to hide behind that language and to not really tell people and show people who you really are. You just cannot step up to the mic as a hip hop artist and do it well and not tell your story and not really just leave your guts all over the stage. You can't do it and do it well. And so I think in that regard, hip hop is a really powerful medium to communicate anything. So however you look at the world, you're not going to be able to keep the fingerprints of your worldview off of the lyrics as a hip hop artist. It's just really hard to do that. And so I think especially guys who are believers in Jesus, who are also rappers, and I think of guys like Propaganda and guys like Lecrae. I mean, the people you might have heard of.
Yeah.
And so many others. There's a bunch of there's like a renaissance of guys who follow Jesus who are making kick-ass hip-hop right now.
Yeah.
There's like this renaissance happening right now of like legit hip-hop being made by Christians. And I think that's an especially powerful medium for that particular worldview, just because you're going to hear so much from these guys. And you're going to get beyond just what the surface level content that you get in the majority of what some people call Christian music, which I think is a marketing fiction. But if that's if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. You just don't really I don't feel like I can trust most people who make Christian music because I don't really feel like they're telling me their whole story. I'm not here. It doesn't feel genuine to me. Yeah. The hip hop artists, guys like I mentioned, I feel like I can trust these guys. I feel like they're really telling me a lot more. I'm getting so much more of the story, so much more of their story. Yeah. And so for that reason, I think it's really powerful.
Yeah. One of the guys I know that you've talked about being friends with is Kevin Max, who was in one of the first big Christian rap groups, I guess, in DC
Hybrid
Talk.
Rap, yeah.
So just wondered if you had talked to him about that, engaged it, or if you knew him back in those days and now kind of the art that he's doing and that sort of thing. Yeah,
I only knew back in those days when I was still in Caedmon's and DC Talk were just, they're just legendary, and they're just the kings of the mountain, back in the day. And they actually were so subversive and awesome because Toby Mac, he was a really great. From what I remember, I haven't listened to some of that stuff lately, but I remember some of that as being pretty legit. Like he was a pretty legit rapper. Like he really had a real gift for it. And then you had Kevin Max, who is just one of the finest singers, just one of the best voices I've just ever heard in my life. And Mike, these guys, those three guys were just so talented. All three of them were all-stars, and so in a band together and doing that hybrid kind of pop music, but with hip-hop kind of flair and production. And, they were they were huge, and I haven't. So I only knew them from a distance. You know, even though we weren't. I would not ever flatter myself to say that we were peers back in those days. I mean, we stood with everybody freaking out watching them, just like everybody else. But I've gotten to know Kevin in the last few years, and we've gotten to be friends. And you know what? Like, he is such a chameleon of a singer. His voice is so versatile. He can do so many things. Like, he's just recently joined up with Audio Adrenaline, and so they're going back out on the road, and that's an incredible story. If your people don't know that story and familiar with Audio Adrenaline from back in the day, that's an incredible thing that's happening for them right now, and Kevin being a big part of that. But I've never talked to him specifically about hip hop at all, actually. I would love to talk to Toby about hip hop, you know, and kind of what he sees as kind of the arc of where it started when he was doing it, where it's come, and what's happening now with the more underground Christian hip hop scene. But yeah, I really should. Note to self.
And then too, I was going to ask some of the even like business aesthetics that you've gotten from hip hop. I know that kind of noise trade and kind of the whole like mixtape grind. Rappers were giving their stuff away for free for a long time and building audiences that way. And I know that you've kind of developed some of that. I first got into your music in like Mockingbird when you were giving that away for free. So
yeah, I mean, I think I love how so many, even mid-level hip hop artists are kind of known. It's kind of part of the hustle that you become an entrepreneur. And so many, even the mid-level guys, sign artists and have their own labels and run their own businesses. There's kind of no other genre. Again, man, it's like hip hop. It's another place where they're really pioneers in that genre. You know, I mean, Jay-Z being obviously the pinnacle example of it. But like, you get in and you immediately learn how to run your business. And for a lot of my friends who are folk singers and acoustic and singer-songwriters and whatever, they don't really understand that side of it, of having to learn how to do every piece of the job and learn how to build a sustainable small business. That's essentially what you're doing. And to grow your business and to make investments into your business that might require giving away music, because you can give away 10 times what you can sell today, and you can convert some percentage of all the people who know about you now into paid customers later. You know, then that's the way you grow a business. Now, a lot of people in the music industry don't understand that. As you said, hip hop artists have known that for a long time, and they're all moguls, and they're all pioneers, and they're all, you know, they all run their own businesses, and they run labels, and all these guys do it, and they've understood it for a long time. And you know, so I kind of came into it. You know, we launched Noise Trade. I don't know what it was, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, something, and just in the last year or two, we've had a ton of hip-hop artists bring their music over to us, which has been so cool for me because, again, I mean, I respect so many of these guys in the way they run their businesses, and so I've loved to have that tool developed and available and to watch them come and use it. And we've had some, you know, Trip Lee came over, and we've had a handful of those other guys bring their tunes over and put stuff up, singles or mixtapes or full albums or whatever it is they're working on, demos of tunes, and give away just crazy amounts. Like there were a couple of weeks a few months ago where like the top 8 or 10, you know, out of the top 8 or 10 most downloaded records, and we give away almost 500,000 records a month. You know, we give away a lot of music. And literally, like, more than half of the top 5 or 6 artists were all these underground hip hop artists. And a couple of them came over, and then they all saw those guys do it, and a bunch more guys came in. And we are definitely pursuing more relationships with people in the hip hop industry just because they get it. Man, you don't even have to pitch it to them. You don't have to, like, with so many other artists I talk to representing Noise Trade, I feel like I've got to give the whole pitch, and here's how the economics break down, here's how it works, and here's how you use it, and you give the music away, and blah, blah, blah. These guys get it, man. They're telling us ideas of how to do it.
And they may be more inclined, like, oh, I actually get something back, a phone number and a zip code. I'm not just putting it on MediaFire and people are...
Right. And you know, and so then there's, you know, guys like Humble Beast who are just a gargantuan, you know, like a powerhouse of hip-hop marketing, and those guys, you know, just have it down. And they give a lot of stuff away totally for free. And I'm trying to get them to, you know, and they get, like, do it every different way. Because like Propaganda's record right now, you can go to Humble Beast and get it for free, but it's also like an editor's pick on Amazon. And, you know, they're selling a bunch of them too.
I think he charted the day it dropped on iTunes. So.
You know, so the guys like that are charting, but also giving it away. So I'm like, give it away for a click, give it away for an email and a zip, sell it on iTunes, sell it on Amazon. I mean, have it everywhere that your fans or anybody goes looking for you, you need to be there waiting for them. So we want to get them all on Noise Trade too. I mean, I want to really build up our hip hop genre on Noise Trade, you know. And boy, those guys, they're just cranking out so much good material.
Yeah.
Hoping to get them all over.
Yeah. Just a couple more questions.
Mm-hmm.
One, he just stepped out of the room, but Josh Moore's a guy that's produced and helped, I think, bring a lot of electronic sound to Stockholm Syndrome and the SOLA-MI project. How did you kind of connect with him, and did he help kind of get you more into that sound, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I've known Josh for a long time. So Josh was in Caveman's Call with me way back in the day. And he was really young. He was like in high school when we drug him out on the road, homeschooled him on the road for real. And so I've known Josh for a long time, and it was right before the Stockholm Syndrome record, and I don't know how many years ago that was, but maybe 4 years ago or so, that I really wanted to, I was ready to kind of like take the jump into more programmed music and kind of more hip-hop influence and more electronic influence. Mm-hmm. But I really did not have the skills. I did not know how to make that music. And so I called Josh, because Josh had been doing a bunch of production in hip-hop. So he'd been working with these huge hip-hop artists in Houston. And so I immediately thought, well, I need to go talk to my buddy Josh. We've known each other for so long, but I was like, I need to go collaborate with Josh. This is the time. Like, he's the guy who can like help me transition. And so honestly, making Stockholm Syndrome, just watching him, the way he was programming, I learned so much. And now I do remix stuff for other artists and do a lot. And I learned it all just sitting behind Josh, you know, because he was doing a lot of that production. And yeah, he totally brought me in, man. He was like my mentor.
Yeah. Cool. Well, last thing, I know you got to go, but have you been unblocked by Questlove on Twitter yet? I know that.
Dude, I don't know what happened, man. Like Quest, like I'm such a big fan, and I used to follow him years ago, and then I stopped following for a while. He just, like me, he tweets a lot, you know, and I do too, you know.
Yeah.
Like I'm terrible. Like I'm a tweetaholic. I have people unfollow me every day because I tweet a lot, and so I didn't follow him for a while. But I'm such a huge Roots fan. I'm a huge Roots fan. And I mean, I literally liken them to like the band, you know, Dylan's band back in the 60s and 70s. Like, they're like the ultimate house band, and yet make the most incredible original albums. And they're just like, I mean, there's nobody's taken the mantle that the band had back then, like the Roots have. And Questlove, man, is their leader. And so one day I decided I'm going to follow Quest again. Like, I love him, and I just gotten their new record, and I was like freaking out undone. And so I get on Twitter, and I'm like, announced that I was following Quest again, you know, and I was like, and I made some crack at the end, you know, but very tongue-in-cheek about like I might have to like get a separate feed for Quest because he tweets a lot. And I even said like that's from a confessed tweetaholic, you know, but you know, at the beginning I was like, he's such a hero. And, you know, in 140 characters I was just singing his praises. And so I put that up, and then I went and played a gig. And then I came out of the gig and was checking Twitter, and it was just like my feed had blown up with these people being like, there's like a Twitter feud between me and Questlove. And I was like, anything happening between me and Questlove is a good thing for me, because like has how many million people following him on Twitter. I was like, any connection to Questlove is going to be is a connection, and I'm happy for that. But like apparently he had responded to me and said, hey man, you know, like nobody's holding a gun to your head to follow me. And I think he just maybe had a rough day and was kind of lashing out at me a little bit, saying that he tweeted a lot. And I immediately came back and said, oh no man, like I'm such a big fan. Like you didn't reread my tweet. You know, like I do it way too much. Like I'm totally with you. I love it, you know. But he didn't get my apology because he blocked me. And he got on his feed and he was like, oh man, like it was a rough day. Like I blocked my first verified user, because I'm a verified user on Twitter. I blocked my first verified user, you know, what a bummer. And so his feed was blowing up like, who is it? And he never told everybody. But it started to figure out that I was like, no way, it's me, because I saw that tweet. I was like, no way, he's talking about me. He just told his whole feed about it, millions of people. And then like I tried to get everybody to like have him unblock me. And me and Josh was about to have his second child, but we were like hatching the plan to like do a tribute track to the Roots, and I was going to write a song called, you know, their new record was called Undone. I was going to write a song called Unblock. And it was a tribute track and try to get up on YouTube. And I had this vision of like me on Fallon with, you know, him unblocking me on the air and him backing me up on the track we had made. But then Josh, his wife had a child. We couldn't make the track, but that was going to be my way to get unblocked. And to this day, he's still blocking me, man. And like, I'm his biggest fan. Like, I don't know what happened. Quest, if you see this, bro, you got to unblock me. Like, anyway. I got to know what you had for breakfast this morning, bro. I got to know what's happening in the back halls of Fallon. Like, how am I going to know if you keep blocking me?
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Let's here's hoping this gets me unblocked.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Where can people find you online best?
DerekWebb.com. DerekWebb. Yeah. So I got all my stuff from there and everything /Derek Webb. People can find me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great to talk to you.
Cool.